Do you need help protecting your finances as you enter retirement? David Dickens of KC Financial Advisors has got you covered. Welcome to the Cover Your Assets KC podcast.
Are you an accidental retiree? Could you become one? And what would you do if it happened? We're going to cover all of that on today's show. Welcome to another edition of Cover Your Assets KC. Walter Storholt here with David Dickens, President, Wealth Advisor at KC Financial Advisors. Find us online at coveryourassetskc.com. David, you ready for another good episode today?
I'm ready for another good episode. It's all built around this book, which I just finished rereading, and it is
not reading, but rereading. You're like that level smart, David, where you're in that category of people who rereads books.
You know, I don't reread too many books, but this is such a good read. And frankly, Harry Truman is from right down the road, and so the book is called The Accidental President. And it covers the first, maybe 6 months of his presidency and the last 3 or 4 months of FDR, who he preceded, and how he became vice president. And his first 6 months he had the World War II, Germany, Japan, and dropping the A-bomb. It's a super fast and good read. And so it got me thinking, though. So first of all, I highly recommend the book if somebody's looking for a fun, super interesting historical read. But it got me thinking about some of my clients who have been accidental retirees. They weren't looking to retire. They certainly weren't looking to get let go, but it kind of happened all at once. I actually had a couple of them who were laid off from Sprint, local employer. And, their question was, well, with the severance, do I even need to get a new job? I've had a couple of other clients who lost their jobs totally unexpectedly in their early 60s. And their questions were, well, do I have enough? Do I need to go get a real job? Could I make do with what I have? Or maybe I need a kind of a gig job, a part-time deal. And so most of us have an ideal age that we want to retire. Maybe hopefully you've got that in your plan if you're in your 30s and 40s and you've been following along for the last year with these podcasts. So you kind of have a view of what your ideal age to retire. But sometimes your employer doesn't agree with that. And so the question is, what would I do? What are the steps that I need to go through if I find myself in that spot? And that's what we want to talk about today.
I like it. So if I'm an accidental retiree, or if, you might be in that job, David, where you might be able to predict a little bit. I might become an accidental retiree. If you read the tea leaves of your job and employment a little bit. Some people can kind of sense that possibility coming a little bit. So, yeah, it's a good reason to perk your ears up a little bit if you think you could fall into that, or if you have fallen into that, or even if you don't think that's on the horizon, still a good one to listen into, because we never know when that accidental retirement might pop up for any of us. So
exactly. And something you just said made me think, well, this is frankly the exact same strategy you would determine if you were saying, all right, could I become work optional? Maybe you're 60, maybe you're 58, maybe you're 62, and you're saying, my lifestyle would be so much more awesome if I went part-time, but can I do that? And so it might be that you trigger the accidental retirement and it'd be a premeditated retirement. Either way, I think these 3 steps are the steps that you need to go through in order to determine, have I done enough?
Okay, well, what's step number 1 then?
So step number 1, none of this is rocket science, but it's a sequential way of thinking about your situation such that you can make a logical, quantitative decision. So the first one is, what do I spend now? What are my expenses? And where will my health care come from if I'm no longer employed and my employer is paying for those? So regarding your current spending, you kind of want to break it down into the must-haves and the lifestyle extras. So for instance, do I still have a mortgage? How much are my utilities every month? What about my car? Is it going to last? Maybe it's new and I still have a car payment. How much do I spend on food? So those are the kind of the must-haves. You get lifestyle extras like, do I spend a bunch of money on travel that if I were going to take an early exit, or if I got pushed out, well, how much would I really need to spend on travel if things got a little tight, or eating out, or things like that? Maybe that extra, that next new car, could I put that off for 4 or 5 years, or is the car I have currently on its last leg? So kind of the point is, if I need to reduce expenses, where would I start? And if you don't have a good record of your expenses, you have no idea. So step one as an accidental retiree is understanding how much you spend every month, where, and is it on necessities or extras?
Pretty easy to follow. Like you said, not rocket science, but sometimes when we're in these accidental retiree situations, David, our emotions can be all over the place. We can be nervous about what's going to happen next. That can maybe, anytime you go through a stressful situation in life, right? Sometimes it's even difficult to do the basics. So not a bad thing to remind folks of where to begin, even if it's like what should be tying your shoe. So look at those expenses, what's going out the door. What about step 2 for those accidental retirees?
So once you know what your expenses are, you got to figure out, well, where is my income? Now that I don't have a job, where's my income going to come from? And is it enough to cover all of my must-haves? Is it enough to cover all my must-haves plus some lifestyle extras? And if so, how much? So for instance, Social Security. Well, if you're 62 and you find yourself out of a job, you could start taking Social Security. That probably means that you might be low on savings, and so you would have to start some sort of guaranteed cash flow sooner rather than later. And everybody knows from listening to this podcast that taking it at 62 isn't the greatest idea, but if it's a need, well, then that's what it's there for. So what maybe your decision is, do I take it at 62? Might I start at 64? What about 66? Do I wait till my full retirement age at 67? So Social Security is a question that you'd have to answer. And how much is that? If you don't know and you haven't been to ssa.gov in a while, that's a good thing to know. How much would I get every month? Maybe you have a pension. I have a number of clients whose pensions don't start until 65, but I have other clients who can start their pension anytime they want. And so maybe that's a way to start a pension and hold off on Social Security, since Social Security grows by 8% for every year that you don't touch it. Maybe you say, well, all right, I could have a gig job. I used to take rides to the airport with a fellow who was an early retiree. He had a nice Mercedes that he'd drive me to the airport. He wanted a little something extra to do, couldn't play that much golf, and so he was driving that kind of stuff. So a gig job like that, or other things that you might be able to do. Maybe you're a consultant, engineer or something where you can hang out a shingle and do a little bit of consulting. Are there ways to withdraw from savings? Maybe from your 401k rollover tax-free. So you might be able to construct an income such that you could fit into the tax brackets and have your 401k distributions taxed at a very low rate or a zero rate. So I have some clients who in their early years of retirement actually are able to take money out of their retirement plans at a zero tax bracket. So they got the tax deduction when they put the money in. And at least for the early years of their retirement, they're taking it out tax-free. So that's something you'd want to look at. You'd also want to understand, what is my safe withdrawal rate? And that really comes into the third step. The other thing you'd want to do is a portfolio assessment. So if you're going to be taking money out of your portfolios, you would want to make sure that you might be taking too much risk. And in an environment that we're currently involved in, which is a very volatile stock market, you might get nervous at just the wrong time. So you could have too much risk. It's possible you don't have enough risk and you've got a lot of money sitting in the bank earning zero. Well, is that a good strategy? That may be a worse strategy than having too much risk, depending on your situation. The ultimate question you have to ask yourself is, with how I am invested now, my job ended, I know what my expenses are, I'm figuring out my income. With the way I have my nest egg invested, can I weather 15 or a 20 or a 25% stock market downturn without panic? And if you can, then you probably have about the right portfolio allocation. So that's step number 2. Make sure you know where your income sources are, which are guaranteed and which are temporary, what your tax situation is for each of those sources, and then, do I have enough income to cover the things that I want to spend it on if I'm going to stay accidentally retired?
Helpful, David. All right, so then what is step 3 for our accidental retirees?
So step 3 is making sure that you want to be able to answer the question, will my money last? So none of us knows how long we're going to last. The plans that I put together for people, we always target having money left at age 100. Well, very few of us are going to live to 100. Life expectancy, if you're 65, is about 84 for a male and 86 for a female. So you'd certainly want to make sure that you would have enough money to last into your 90s. So your plan is basically looking at the first 2 steps, income and expenses. Do I need to adjust my expenses? A lot of times you can't really adjust your income. You've saved what you're going to save. Your Social Security is what it's going to be. And either you do or don't have a pension. You may go get that gig job, but do I need to adjust my expenses down in order to stay accidentally retired such that my money will last till I'm 90? A lot of times you get the question, oh, man, I still have a mortgage. Maybe I should pay that thing off. And the other thing you should consider is maybe you should refi your mortgage and extend the time frame. Sounds counterintuitive, but when you get into the later years of your mortgage, a lot of that payment is just principal and interest and insurance. So if you were to extend let's say you have 5 or 6 or 7 years left on your mortgage. If you go get a 30-year mortgage, you're not going to be spending really any more on interest on that mortgage than you would if you have a 6 or 7 years left. But you're going to be paying down the principal way slower. So all you're really looking at right now in this time of life is income versus expenses. And if you can reduce your mortgage payment by extending it out, that may actually be a strategy you can use to fit your income and expenses together. Taxes. Can't forget taxes as you're looking through your plan. So is there a way I can get to the 0 tax bracket now in the early years of being accidentally retired that will let me have more money in the later years of retirement? Maybe I do some modest IRA withdrawals now instead of starting Social Security early. And if I can keep myself in the 0 or the 10% bracket, that may be a really smart way to go, because once I turn 72, I'm going to have required distributions. I'm going to have Social Security. Maybe I have a pension. And all of that is going to cause me to be in a higher tax bracket than I would otherwise be with withdrawals today. Maybe you have non-IRA accounts. Well, you take money out of a non-IRA account, and there are no tax implications of that unless you sold a security at a gain or a loss to generate the liquidity you need to make that withdrawal. So those are super important things that you have to make sure are in your plan. You need to make sure you're planning for inflation. You need to make sure that you have some sort of plan for long-term care, even if your plan is, I don't have a choice other than to ignore it and hope I don't need it. At least you've considered and thought about, what is my plan for that? And then what's your plan for your next roof? Let's say you own a house and you've got a 15-year-old roof. Well, your roof is likely going to need to be replaced sometime in the early years of retirement. How old's my air conditioner and my heater, my furnace? Those are things that cost 6 or 8 or 10 grand, and you have to have that built into your plan as well. So to kind of wrap it all into a bundle, if you find yourself accidentally retired and you're trying to figure out, do I need to get a new job? Do I need to get a gig job? Or am I good? You need to make sure that you know exactly what your expenses are for your must-haves and your extras. You need to know exactly what your options are for generating income. And then you need to make sure that you have a real plan that includes things like taxes, inflation, long-term care, and new roof. Do I have enough money based on my spending plan if I don't go back to work, that my money's going to last at least into my 90s? So to circle all the way back to my terrific read that I just finished, Truman had a really good plan, and he had some really good advisors, and he knew who to listen to and who to ignore. And so if you find yourself in this spot, make sure that you're surrounded by some people who are knowledgeable and that you trust and that are helping you in your best interests. And then, you should have some pretty good options for either staying accidentally retired or working until you're 70 in some part-time fashion, or whatever makes you able to put together the retirement lifestyle that you envision.
That's what it's all about here on Cover Your Assets KC, helping you navigate through the challenges that pop up in your financial life, like an accidental retirement. And there you go, some strategies to explore, to think about, and to drill in on that David covered on today's show. And if you need help going down that road a little bit, David's certainly there for you and can help make the process a little bit easier to manage. All you have to do to get in touch and set up that conversation is to call 913-317-1414. That's 913-317-1414. Or you can go online to coveryourassetskc.com. coveryourassetskc.com. You can ask for the complete planning review, which will take you through the planning process, a review of your financial plan currently, where to move it, take it into the future. Again, that is the complete planning review. Don't hesitate to ask for that as well when you call or get in touch through the website with David and the team. David, thanks for walking us through that. Glad you enjoyed the book. Thanks for the recommendation as well. I'll add it to the list. Unfortunately, my book recommendation list is like in the dozens at this point. So, gonna have to go
you need
in
a good beach vacation so you can spend some time
right?
knocking through these books.
The problem is I get on those beach vacations and I just fall asleep. So,
yeah, well,
usually I need long drives.
Intake. I don't know.
That's what I need: long drives or lots of grass mowing and yard work to listen to audiobooks. That's how I plow through them.
There you go.
Yeah, I need to pick a new house project so I can get through another book. Well, thank you, David. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week.
Yeah, I think we'll do some listener questions, so I'm excited about that. We'll talk to you next week.
We'll put it on the agenda. For David, I'm Walter. We'll talk to you next time on Cover Your Assets KC. Thanks for listening.
Investment advisory services offered through ChangePath LLC, a registered investment advisor. ChangePath LLC and KC Financial Advisors are separate companies.